Hi, this is Joe Hubbard and welcome to Advanced Bass. In this lesson, we're going to talk about playing chords on the bass and how to come up with creative chord concepts. The bass guitar has a lot of limitations when it comes to playing chords, so what I'm going to do is demonstrate how to take some basic chord qualities and show you how to get the most out of them sonically. Stay with me. Most bass players are not familiar with how chords appear on the instrument. This is largely due to the basic function of the bass guitar in a performance scenario. As a result, most bass players are left to play single note lines that outline the chord changes being played. You know, there's a reason that most bass players can't distinguish the difference between different chord qualities, because if you never play them, you'll have a much harder time hearing them. It's a fact that most people hear with more clarity on the instrument they play. So it makes perfect sense that learning how to play chord voicings on your bass will enable you to hear chords with greater ease. This is important from the get-go because in a performance situation, playing chord voicings will probably only account for about 1 or 2% of what you would play in its entirety. So why would we want to learn this? The answer is simple. Learning to play chord voicings on your bass will help you to improve your ability to hear and recognize different chord qualities with greater ease. Chords are constructed with chord tones and chord tensions. Piano players have many sophisticated options for playing chord voicings because they're using 10 fingers instead of 4. The limitations that we face on the bass when playing chord voicings is that most of the voicings that we're going to use will only have 3 notes. With this in mind, to capture the characteristic qualities of playing 7th chords, we'll always keep the 3rd and the 7th in the chord. Historically, many bass players would just simply add the root to complete their voicing. But what I want to show you is how you can add chord tensions consisting of 9, 11, and 13 to increase the depth of your chord knowledge and start working those ears to hear the upper extensions of the chord. The first chord that we're going to take a look at is the minor 7th chord. Now remember, what we're going to do is always keep the 3rd and the 7th consistent within each one of the voicings that we're going to work on, and then just alter that 3rd note where we need to by substituting different tensions for different chord tones in the voicing. So in the case of the minor 7th chord, it's going to be a flat 3 and a flat 7. And if we're in C minor 7, I'm going to have E flat and B flat. That's going to be my flat 3 and my flat 7. Now, if I use this on different combinations of strings between the G string and the D string, that gives me a perfect 5th. But between the D and the A string, those same notes gives me a perfect 4th, because all I'm doing is taking that B flat and dropping it below, and that inverts it and gives me a perfect 4th. Now if I use this where I switch it to use the voicing in 4ths between the G string and the D string, this is what I get here. And what happens is that the 3rd now is on the top and the 7th is on the bottom. And then if I do it to where I flip the 5th, perfect 5th pattern to be played on the A and the D string, I've got this. So what I want you to do is start off by just experimenting with these different shapes, and also try to take this in some few different keys so you can see this and start to be able to recognize just by playing the 3rd and the 7th of what the root is. Because if you see this, here's the root. You can put the root in the bottom here, and we can fool around with this with different in different keys. This is very useful to do so you can start recognizing these chords from not always having to picture the root first. Now, following the rules of what's called 4-way closed voicings, what we're going to do is we're going to always have the 3rd and the 7th present in the voicing, and then we're going to start to substitute certain chord tensions 4 certain chord tones. The first one is going to be tension 9. 9 substitutes for the root. So what I'm going to have is this. I'm going to start off with this 5th voicing here, and then I'm going to put the 9 on the bottom, and that's going to give me this nice sort of big fat sound of a minor 9 chord. I put the root there. You can really hear the impact of that. Notice how this sound of this minor second between the 9 and the flat 3 sounds almost kind of ugly. But then when I put a 5th on the top of that, it sounds beautiful. It's interesting how those combinations of intervals can produce that sort of sound. Now, if I put the 9 on the top, then I'm going to take this 5th pattern here, which is my E flat and B flat, or the flat 3 and flat 7. And I'm going to put the D on the top, which is 9, and that gives me a sort of, really rich sound with that 9 on the top. You can really hear the openness of that. The next tension that we're going to use is tension 11. Now, tension 11 substitutes for 5. We don't have 5 in the voicing, so we can use this with impunity with that flat 3 and the flat 7. So if I have this voicing in fourths here of the flat 7 and flat 3, and then I put the tension 11 on the top, you get this really nice sound of that perfect 4th and then that major 2nd on the top. Put the root in on the bottom, and you can hear that how that sort of creates that nice suspended effect with that tension 11 on the top. Now, if I invert that and put it here, then what's happening is I'm just building 2 stacked perfect 5ths, which is also a nice, really nice big open sound. And you can use these just for different things. If I have this here and then this here, I could use that within vamping, maybe with a little chord melody thing, and coming up with some different options for the same voicing. This is useful. So what I want you to do is start experimenting with this, and you gotta start taking this into some different keys. The next chord tension that we're going to look at over the minor 7th chord is tension 13. Now, when you first start experimenting with this particular minor 13 chord, what you'll probably experience is a little bit of dissonance. This will sound a little bit outside if you're not already used to the sound of this chord. With time, a little bit of ear training, a little bit of perseverance, and practicing just repetition of hearing this sound, and it actually will begin to sound a little bit more inside. It's used in a lot of jazz, so just stick with it and persevere with this because it's a beautiful sound. We take that voicing in fourths, which gives us the flat 7 and the flat 3, and I put a tritone above that. That's my 13. So that combination of the 4th and the tritone, very cool sounding, very angular sounding. Put the root in there, and that gives you that nice big sound. So then if I want to drop the 13, I can do that by taking my voicing in fifths, and this gives me the flat 3 and the flat 7 on the top, put the 13 on the bottom, and I get this sound, and then put the root in there. Okay, so start experimenting with this, start moving this into different keys, and then we'll come back and we'll do the dominant 7th chord. The next chord that we're going to take a look at is a dominant 7th chord. Now, when we start using tensions as substitutions over a dominant chord, our options start to expand because we have 3 different 9s. We have flat 9, natural 9, and sharp 9. We have a sharp 11. We have 2 different 13s, which is flat 13 and natural 13. So by taking the 3rd and the 7th of this chord, this is going to be 3 and flat 7. What we get is a tritone shape. And if I take that B flat and invert that and put that on the bottom, that gives me another tritone shape. If I then just swap this around, so I'm playing the 3rd on the top of my G string, I'm going to get this here. So I've got the E, which is the 3rd, and the B flat, which is the flat 7. And then here, drop that E below, and that gives me the tritone shape here. So we have these 4 shapes here that we can mess around with. The first tension that we're going to use as a substitution is tension flat 9. This is going to create a diminished sound. So if I take this sound here, you can hear that real darkness, almost ambiguity of where the key is. We put that root in there, we get that flat 9 sound with that third and the flat 7. That sounds very cool. And this altered dominant sort of sound really reflects a minor key. So it's usually like a 5/7 to a minor key. So this would be a 5 chord resolving to the 1 in a minor key, which would be F minor if we use that. So here, we got that beautiful sort of sound that we have there. Now, if I take the natural 9, I'm just going to move that up a half step and then put the root in the bottom there. And then if I've got the sharp 9, I've got this here. Okay, now what I can do is put the 9s on the top. So I take this pattern here, which is my third in the flat 7. I put the flat 9 here. Again, that gives us that real ambiguous, diminished sort of sound over the dominant. Then I have the tension 9 with the root in the bottom, and then sharp 9. I love this voicing. And this is that real Jimi Hendrix sort of chord, you know, and you also hear this really a versatile chord of voicing, because you hear this in blues, you hear it in funk, you hear it in rock, you hear it in jazz. So really start to practice these to kind of get used to the variations that we've kind of taken a look here. Okay, the next chord tension that we're going to take a look at over a dominant chord is a sharp 11. So if I take this tritone shape here with flat 7 and 3, and I just add that F sharp on the top, we get that tritone and that major second on the top, and then I put that on the bottom, the root. That gives me that cool sharp 11 sound. Okay, it's quite altered sounding, and you know that might take a little bit time if you're not used to listening to a lot of jazz to get this into your ear. But again, the more you repeat something and play something, the more that you're going to be able to associate and make the connection with. And then when you start hearing those voicings on records, you're going to be able to hear what they are and recognize them on the spot. So what happens here is that I can also take this and put that sharp 11 on the top. So if I take the 3 and the flat 7 here, put the sharp 11 on the top there, and then put the root in the bottom, that gives me that nice outside sort of sharp 11 sound. Okay, the next group of tensions that we're going to look at over the dominant 7th chord are the 13s. And we're going to start with the flat 13. Now this is kind of an out sound. It really creates an altered dominant sort of sound. And it has that strong desire to want to resolve to that 1 minor chord. So if we take that tritone shape where we had the B flat and the E, or the flat 7 and the third, and I put a flat 13, a major third above that, you have this sort of sound. And then I've put the root in, and that gives you that nice sound, which really kind of pulls you to that 1 chord in F minor. Okay, so then if I can take that voicing and turn it around and put the flat 13 on the bottom by just doing this. So it gives me this sort of sound. I kind of prefer the 13s voicings with the 13s on the top, but you can mess around with those on your own. If you then just raise that flat 13 up 1/2 step, you get the natural 13. So if I go back to my shape here and then just put the natural 13, a fourth above that, that gives me that cool sound. You can play it like this. And that sound is probably recognizable to you because that's the chord that Jaco used in Teen Town, which you've probably heard hundreds of times, if not thousands. And so he had this sort of thing moving in minor thirds. And what's cool about that is once you make the connection between hearing that and recognizing that from Teen Town because you've heard that so many times, what tends to happen is later on you'll hear something else and you'll go, oh yeah, that's that chord from Teen Town. And that sort of cements that connection with the sound. And that's super important so you can recognize these things, with a lot more sort of clarity and speed. What I want you to do is take these, work these in all the different keys. And also, what is kind of important as well is noting what I'm doing with my right hand. I'm using the open or free stroke. We take this from the classical vernacular. It's really taking the thumb and the index and the middle finger and then sort of playing these voicings like this. You can sort of arpeggiate the voicings or you could play it simultaneously. And I kind of prefer this technique with chords rather than strumming with my thumb, although you can just experiment with different techniques and see what works with you. Okay, now you go practice. It's rare that I would perform a solo bass piece, but every now and again I'll do that during a master class to demonstrate the possibilities. This is a solo bass arrangement of Somewhere Over the Rainbow, which was inspired by the Keith Jarrett version. Of all the musical elements, it seems that hearing chords are subjected to more neglect than any other. From day one, students of the bass guitar are barraged by scales and arpeggios, but rarely are playing chords given equal time in the practice room. There's a direct link between what you can hear and your general musicianship skills. In my new book, How to Practice with Maximum Efficiency, available at joehubbardbass.com, I explain the difference between practicing soft skills versus hard skills. Hard skills tend to relate to the physical side of practicing the instrument, while soft skills represent much of the mental work that you must do behind the scenes. Learning to play and recognize chord qualities falls into that soft skill category because it isn't something that we're going to end up doing in a performance with much regularity. Until next time, practice smart, work hard, and play creatively.